In today's episode of Can I Walk and Chew Gum at the Same Time? Take 39. This is a little bit harder than those fancy YouTubers with 1 million subscribers would lead you to believe. But you're listening anyway, so let's get into it. My name is Jonathan, and I draw stuff. Before we get into what this channel is going to be about, I thought I would give you a little bit of a background on myself and how I got where I am today and why you might find me worth listening to. As a kid, I spent most of my time hiding away in my bedroom, drawing fantastical cars with strange guns and rocket ships attached to them, or reading comic books and then filling pages of notebooks and my walls with drawings of my favorite comic book characters and video game characters. Really, most of my childhood, my only goal was to cover everything I could in drawings, paintings, what have you. And that certainly didn't change when I went to school, where instead of doing the required homework assignments, I instead would turn the margins of my pages black with notes and doodles, and that really didn't go over the way I thought it would, and my grades in elementary school sort of reflected that. Going into high school, I still drew in my spare time and did some of that, but it really wasn't something that I knew or thought I could do long term. Everybody at that era was going into computer technology and IT, and that's what everybody was telling us that we needed to do. But luckily, I did take a few art classes on a whim, and I had a really great art teacher who kind of opened my eyes to this bigger world out there and what the possibilities were of taking some of the raw talent that I guess I had and turning it into something that I could make a career of. So with his help, I scrambled and put together what was probably a horrible portfolio, but it was good enough to get me a scholarship at CCAD, the Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio. So with that, I moved to the booming metropolis of Columbus and spent 4 years in art school, initially as an industrial design major. So my first couple of years of college were spent designing flashlights and toasters and redesigning hand tools and power tools. And then in my spare time, doodling cars and dreaming of one day working for General Motors, which is a short-lived fantasy of every industrial design student. But from there, I took a few other random electives at the request or suggestion of some of my teachers that knew I was really good at drawing and illustrating. And those classes were more in the interior design realm, and that turned me on to the whole world of retail design and store design, restaurants, that sort of thing. So that kind of brings me to where I am today. I've been a working professional for 16 years, and I try to draw and do sketching by hand as much as I can, but it is the computer age, so it's not always advantageous. But I'm hoping this will help me knock those cobwebs off, and hopefully I can share some tips and tricks with you along the way. So I want to do a quick little demonstration just to get the ball rolling, and then there will be lots of other fun content hopefully coming soon after this. So I appreciate you listening this far and bearing with me as I work through some rookie jitters in the world of YouTube. So what I'm doing here is just blocking out a really rough thumbnail sketch of what I think this space could be. And when I do a sketch like this, I'm really trying to focus on conveying a big idea, not really nailing down the entirety of the space and what every angle and shape is going to be, but really deciding what that main story is to tell, and then using as few lines as possible, try to convey that in a sketch that is compelling and easy to read, and is something that can be built on and taken into 3D, AutoCAD, whatever. So it's just really that jumping off point for a project. So once I have a really crude initial idea laid out in some quick thumbnail lines, I'll kind of use that as an underlay to then do some clean line work on top of. And I'm not really trying to be super precise still, but I do want to have some straight lines and some defined shapes so that you can understand the space a little bit better. And so as I'm sketching, it's really just about setting some proportions, creating some defining lines of where the walls and the general space be, so you get a sense of the scale of what the shop or restaurant or whatever the project happens to be. This one I'm envisioning could be a small retail space, and I really want to focus on this central low platform. So that's going to become the focal point of the sketch as I progress through. And for all these videos that I'll be doing, I'm not the neatest or most organized Photoshop user. So this won't be in the format of a Photoshop tutorial where I'm talking about layer organization or linking layers and layer masks and all that. As the channel grows, if it grows, and if there's people that are interested in knowing some of those tricks, I'll of course get into that. But what I really want to focus on is kind of the creative thought process behind it, and then you'll see me switching layers, creating new layers, whatever. But that's kind of a secondary point, and hopefully that's not too confusing for you. But what I really want to focus on is just the idea of how can you create a really fast sketch to convey an idea, clean it up a bit, turn it into something that can be presented to a client, and can kind of convey where you want to take a project. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to come from with these sketches. So in any of my sketches, I'll throw a couple scale people in. Everybody has their own style of scale people. These that I draw have kind of evolved over the years, and it's as few lines as possible to just create that sense of scale. You immediately understand how big the space is and the relation of the people to some of the fixtures or shapes, furniture that you're trying to create. So once I have the basic line work laid down, I'll sometimes go back in with a thicker weight pencil or brush, if you will, and lay in some key defining line work on the underside of objects, on the far side of objects, things that help define where a surface might turn or where a surface might be layered in front of something else. It just helps to let the mind and the eye read the space a little bit easier. So you can immediately see with a couple of those heavier black lines that things start to come into focus a bit better. That central podium pops out a bit more. And you can really start to get a sense of the spatial planning that's going on. And here I'm adding a little bit of embellishment to the line work once I have all of the basic shape done. Just with throwing some light lines down through the floor that will eventually become the hints at some reflective lines to imply that it's a polished concrete type of surface on the floor. And you can give a hint or allude to certain materials without going into a full rendering. The idea of these sketches is get the line work down as fast as possible. Add one or two key colors that might help sell whatever the main feature is of the sketch, and then move on. There'll be time later in the design process with SketchUp, AutoCAD, 3D Studio to really get into what some of those materials are in a more accurate way. But again, this is trying to get an idea in front of a potential client or supervisor or teacher, whatever it is, as fast as possible. So one of the last things after the basic architecture is sort of established is start to hint at some product. And I say product loosely. If you're drawing a restaurant, it's going to be maybe some tableware, some flatware, some glasses, some bottles of wine, trays, some of those added little details that really bring the space to life and really give an intent of what the space is about. So in this case, it's some generic clothing boutique. So I'm just adding some little scribbles in to give a hint at some folded apparel and shelves, maybe some bags, some face out merchandise, some sleeve out or side hung merchandise. And this is something that you can really go crazy with detail on, or you can take more of this route where it's really, really loose and scribbly. If you really start to dissect the lines, it doesn't really represent anything, but when you step back and look at it overall, you get a pretty clear understanding of the type of merchandise, how it's being merchandised or shown in the store, and it gets the idea across well enough that the people can understand it. Everybody has their own style of drawing stacks of clothing and bottles and shirts and that sort of thing. And if you're just starting out and building your repertoire of drawing skills, I encourage you to do tracing overlays on pictures of stores and just practice drawing a stack of shirts or a row of cups as fast as you can. And what's the minimal amount of line work that you can use to get the idea across that those are real products. And it's really pretty impressive what the mind can do to kind of fill in the blanks and understand what you're trying to convey with a sketch. You really don't have to labor things too much in that regard. So here I'm just finalizing and finishing up some of this product placement. This top part of the sketch, I kind of just don't feel like drawing more product. So I'm thinking maybe instead of product, it's a large digital display or a video screen of some type that'll bring some energy to the space. So I'll just kind of put that there for now and move on a little bit. A few more scale people. Try to add scale people throughout the space. Always, their heads perfectly lined up on that eye level you create. So then you can throw people far back in the space, up front in the space, and really create that sense of depth and activity and engagement. So now that that's done, I'm going to do something to start to make this sketch a little bit more dynamic. So I throw a dark gray background behind the line work layers, and then I just invert the line work to make it pop. And immediately it gives a different tone to the sketch with that heavy or with that darker background. And then it's easy to pop things off of it to again get that to that end goal of making the sketch really dynamic with as minimal amount of work as possible. So as I said earlier, I really wanted to focus on that central plinth or low platform of merchandise. So just making that a big, bold red color. And then I'll take just a little bit of extra care and time to give some simple shading. Again, this is my key feature, so I just want to take a little bit of extra time to make sure that it reads accurately. It has a nice shape and volume, and so you can get a little bit fancier with some of the line work here and make it feel a little bit more like more of a hand-done marker rendering, if you will. And then once that's established, I'll just go in and erase a little bit of the red from that product just to make that pop a little bit and create a separation or a differentiation between the product and that central platform. So next what I want to do is, just start working on the general ambiance of the space. So I've established what the key features are, and now I'm just throwing a little bit of a red glow onto the floor, imagining a bit of a reflectivity. And then I'm going to work on this lighting element that's suspended over that central platform. So again, really, really quick and dirty, white shape, use a Photoshop effect, an outer glow, just to give it a bit of a light effect. Photoshop layers or filters, they're not necessarily the most accurate or best ways to create effects. But when we are just looking at these quick sketches, it really doesn't matter that much. It works well enough, and you don't need to belabor it. If you want to use a big soft brush or something and fade it in more manually, you're welcome to do that. The next thing I'm doing is I'm just laying in some really rough and light reflection lines on the floor, just to, again, create this sense of a little bit of glossiness and allude that it's maybe like a polished concrete or a tile, without going into too much detail. In my sketches, I always add little blips and blops of brighter tones of white, little highlights, things that just make the sketch a little bit more visually interesting and just add a little bit of an artistic flair or character. There's a million ways to do it. A lot of people have their own techniques for doing a similar thing, but it's just ways of taking something that you're working on digitally and just bringing in a little bit of that human touch so it doesn't feel like it's too computer generated. And so what I want to also do is anytime I get a chance in a sketch, allude to lighting elements or lighting features, things that can add some of that sparkle or life and energy to a sketch. So I'm just putting in some little blobs that can hint at some track lighting in the ceiling, maybe. Just a chance, again, to add some of that visual interest. For some of these sketches to feel more complete, you kind of just need to fill the space a little bit with line work. It's a bit counterintuitive because you don't want to belabor adding too much line work to any specific detail or fixture, but adding in some loose overall line work just for artistic purposes and to fill the space a little bit is a good technique. And so one of the last things I'm going to do here is try to create a really strong contrast element just to help everything pop forward a bit more even. And there's different ways to do this, but one of the easiest is to really work some black into your sketches. And it's only, it's not always appropriate, but the idea of giving the whole sketch something to sort of stand off against is a good approach, just to create that immediate impact from a sketch standpoint. So I've created this black square, and I don't really like how stiff and angular it feels. So I'm going to go back in and just add some brush lines on the sides, just to again make it feel a little bit more like it's been done by hand or by a marker. And then, bring to life this video screen, whatever it is. And because of the red that I'm putting in the central plinth, maybe there's some red that's used here as well. So I'll just sample that red, add it over there, and add some little white details. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just kind of greeking in some activity. the same thing on the other side of the wall. You just want to give your eye something to kind of dance across the image a little bit so that you're not hung up on looking at any one detail for too long, just to convey that quick overall idea. And that's pretty much it for this first sketch. I was hoping to narrate these and draw them in real time, but that's proven to be way more difficult than I thought. So I hope you don't mind that I'm adding this audio in after the fact. But I encourage you to follow along, like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube lingo. And if you have any specific things that you'd like to see me try to sketch or demonstrate or illustrate, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I hope to come back soon with some more great content, sketch demonstrations, and hopefully a lot less bugs and glitches and nerves on my part. So I appreciate you tuning in. See you next time.